extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is A View from Space. I'd like to welcome you in if you're driving around town right now. If you're at work listening to AM 640, I welcome you in. Or if you're listening to me right now on Shaw Direct on Channel 865, I welcome you in there too. Or if you're listening to me on your 3 or 4G personal communication device via the Stream the World software, I welcome you in too. Or if you're what some call the best seat in the house, bar none, sitting in front of your Mac, your PC at home, logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. Well, this show comes on the back of the news, the Illuminati-controlled mass media this week, that Greece has been given a 4-month extension on their loan, and now they're going to have to get together an austerity list because the debt will not be forgiven, of course. Angela Merkel, speaking for the EU, who's owed all the money, all the European banks are saying, you have to pay your money back. Well, why wouldn't they? I mean, that's the way it is these days. The cabal that I talk about, the bloodline I talk about, is, in fact, not needing an army to take over a country any longer, not needing an invasion to take over a country any longer. You get them into debt. Debt is the power of money, not gold. So, really, there has been no progress in that Greek debt, or the Portuguese, or the Spanish, or the Italian. It goes on and on, because you see, what's really being sold around the world now is debt. People are buying each other's debt. It's a whole system of cards. It's about to fall apart. So, are you one of those people who accept the world as it's being presented to them? See, this has been going on a long time. History repeats itself. Thousands of years ago, civilizations rose and fell, and each time one fell, another one took its place. By civilizations, I really mean the creation of artificial systems. Yeah, artificial, not real. Like money. Yeah, money is, of course, used to build these artificial systems called civilizations. And when you think about it, money is a very unnatural thing to use for selling something. It has absolutely no use in itself. It's only a tool. What's more, it's paper. And what's more, that paper isn't even backed by anything any longer. No, it's fiat currency, air money, created out of thin air, that's used for selling something or purchasing something. It has absolutely no use in and of itself, money. That's how it's pushing economies to the edge, to the brink of bankruptcy. So it's a tool that helps you sell or purchase something. Now it's a tool to take over countries. Now, it helps the buying and selling process by using a middleman, doesn't it? And of course, those who introduce the money, the banks, the politicians, ultimately control the buyer and the seller. Yes. Only governments, you see, have the right, the power to print money. From money, they build cities. Cities are an artificial hive, an artificial beehive, as Plato once called them. And through cities, these civilizations really are one civilization under a lot of different faces. Through the cities, they could, because we use money in in a city, and we can't sustain ourselves. We can't feed ourselves living in a city. Cities are totally artificial. In other words, our culture has changed from the days of the farmland. Growing up on a farm, very few people now do that. We're all living in the cities. It's become fluid and flexible, which is not a natural thing. A person's culture means you relied on the past, the history of your people, to keep you on the right path. Now we have cultures mixing into one another. And the West dominating, of course, because of the power of money and indebtedness. Madonna, for instance, for years, decades, had been used as the culture buster for the Illuminati, for other peoples of the world. I mean, Madonna, when she first hit the stage, she had all the little Japanese girls wanting to, well, give up their old culture and be just like the person on stage. The role model, Madonna, the culture buster for many, many other countries. For instance, as I said, Japan, that culture for promiscuity, the fashion, the girl power of that country gone now. That changing culture has changed to a Western style country. Yes, the civilization of ancient Babylon had girl power. See, that's what the Illuminati are about, goddess worship at this time. Changing culture is a science. The Illuminati have got it down pat from all of their experience they've gathered in the past. They know how to manipulate cultures. They always start in the cities where, once they have money circulating and they've trained the people outside, the farmers, to accept money for their food products and so on, then they start to build a standing army from inside the city, and with that army they go outside of the city and conquer other people, forcing them into their system. Force them to use money. They give them a religion, and really they become simply slaves. And as Charles Galton Darwin once said, the grandson of Charles Darwin, every civilization has really been a form of slavery for the people. And he was all for it. That was the natural order of things, according to him, and of course all who are trained in power and control over the masses, the elite rich. This is a Spaceman, a VFS, just getting started. Back with more in just a minute. I'm the guy they call Space. This is a view from space. If you'd like to communicate with me, space at 640toronto.com, spaceman at 640toronto.com. Two addresses. I communicate by email only. And thank you for the one that you've sent me. They start coming in before this show even begins with suggestions, questions, comments. And I thank you, each and every one of you who take the time to send me a note. So as I said before the break, Charles Galton Darwin, the grandson of Charles Darwin, once said every civilization has really been a form of slavery for the masses. And of course he's right. And he was all for it. Because that's the natural order of things, according to him. And of course, one of the powerful elites. The elite, you see, are trained in this technique to stay on top, right from birth. You see, the Illuminati picked Darwinism as the religion for you and I. And because it's the law of the jungle, the fittest survive. It suits the one with the power and the money, does it not? The elite rich are the strongest in the jungle and will always prevail. We are, after all, according to Darwinism, just animals. The Illuminati kids are brought up listening to a different version of reality than you and I are. They rarely see their mother and father. Other people bring them up. They're taught the reality of life, and that is that predators, them, should be at the top of the natural order. They're predators, of course, because they're such hypocrites. As good predators, they can't tell the rest of us how they're really feeding off of us or manipulating us for different ends, because we don't understand these things. And those with the low IQs, the little people at the bottom of the pyramid, you and I, must be therefore kept in the dark. So, talking head experts always appear on the Illuminati-controlled mass media, explaining all of the things very simply for you. You know what they call you and I? What they teach their children to call you and I? The profane. Profane, in Masonry, means those in darkness. Base people, which is a real hypocrisy in itself, because it's like breaking the legs of a cow and then kicking the cow because the cow can't get up anymore. That's the hypocrisy of this system you and I are living in, and that's how the elites who are running this show view the public. They've broken our legs and hate us because we can't get up. We're pathetic. And of course they claim that we need them. They're too big to fail. It's like saying that the mice in the fields need the hawk. It's the logic of the predator. From the days of Babylon, ancient Babylon, and before Babylon, they called them Harappans. One of the most mysterious cultures of the ancient world is the Harappan civilization. This culture existed along the Indus River in present-day Pakistan. Now, I believe if you don't know any or very little or none of the past history of mankind, then you have no idea where we're at today. And if you have no idea of where we came from, where we're at today, you have no idea of where we're going. So, this culture I talk about tonight, to start the show with, the Harappan civilization. It was named after the city of Harappa, which is centered around Harappa, the city of Mohenjo-Daro, where the greatest achievements of the Indus Valley civilization were achieved. These cities were well known for their impressive and organized layouts. Over 100 other towns and villages were built in the surrounding area. The Harappan people were literate, used the Dravidian language. Only part of this language has been deciphered even today, leaving a lot of questions about this civilization unanswered. The Harappan civilization in ancient Babylon, before Babylon, was urban and mercantile, meaning a meeting together of people for the purpose of trading by private purchase and sale. Inhabitants of that Indus Valley traded with Mesopotamia. They traded with southern India. They traded with Afghanistan and Persia for gold, silver, copper, turquoise. That's a mineral that is a bluish green or greenish gray hydrous-based phosphate of copper and aluminum. It takes a high polish, and it's valued as even a gem when it's sky blue and polished. It's beautiful. The Mesopotamian model of irrigated agriculture was even used to take advantage of the fertile grounds along that Indus River area. Now, earthlinks were also built to control the river's annual flooding. They were quite great engineers, very advanced. Crops grown included wheat, barley, peas, melons, sesame seeds. The civilization was the first ever to cultivate cotton for the production of cloth. Some animals were first domesticated there, also, including the elephant, which is used for its ivory back then. The Harappan culture extended all the way from Egypt right through the Middle East, all the way to China, and now they're excavating pre-Sumerian Harappan cities on trade routes, and of course, to live that very high standard of living, these merchants used the money system. Hell, they even had indoor plumbing. The Harappan civilization peaked at around 2500 BC and ended around 2000 BC. Now, since then, we've spent another 2,000 years on this planet. So you look back on the Harappan civilization, well, what caused its downfall? Another civilization was created by destroying the old one. Culture busting. History is repeating itself. We're about to go through this cataclysmic change once again from one civilization, really, one empire to another. You can feel it coming. Nothing is working in this old, sad economy, this old, sad world, this old, sad system, is the message from the Illuminati. Another civilization, you see, is always created by destroying the old one. It's called culture busting, wiping out cultures. Just what was the replacement then for the Harappan civilization? It was the Aryan civilization. Aryan religious texts and human remains in Mohenjo-Daro provide evidence that the Aryans, the Persians, violently entered the area, killing its inhabitants and burning the cities. At the dawn of civilization, there were two distinct civilizations appearing on the earth in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, which is to say where the Garden of Eden was located. Those places that are spoken about from the very beginning of time that the King James Version of the Bible goes back and explains. The two systems, the two civilizations, Sumerians and Harappans. The Sumerians settled in the valleys between the Tigris and Euphrates, a land known as Mesopotamia, the area known today as Kuwait, Iraq. One of the most important cities of this civilization was Ur. Ur is the city from which the King James Version of the Bible, God called Abram, as mentioned in Genesis 11:31, Abram set out from Ur and Nineveh. You are the Lord God who chose Abram and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans and named him Abraham. So says the King James Version of the Bible. That's the area that is now Pakistan, part of Afghanistan now too, and northern India. The Harappan civilization appeared in the floodplain of the Indus and Hakra rivers. Its two most important cities were Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. The Sumerian and Harappan economies developed along similar lines and had comparable religious and social structures. Nevertheless, their politics, though, their art, and, are you ready? Because things never change, the treatment of women and intellectual advancements. meaning enlightenment, were totally opposite to one another of the Sumerian and the Harappans. But by far, very important, but by far, I believe, the most important city in Iraq, even to this day, for the Illuminati, is Mosul. Yes. Why? Well, as a matter of fact, they're talking about it and doing something that is like totally out of whack. Never, well, I can't think of a time ever when it was done, but there's now a plan to attack ISIS in Mosul, Iraq, sometime in May or June. Now it's being publicized and broadcast to the world. NATO is going to attack Mosul in May or June of this coming summer, led by Western troops, likely the U.S., possibly other members of NATO joining them. Yeah, the headline today even read, Iraq Kurdish force of 25,000 to retake Mosul from ISIS. Mosul is today's Iraq's second largest city. And it's being held right now by what's described by the Illuminati-controlled mass media as a handful, like 2,000 ISIS militants. That's it. And they supposedly held this city captive since last June. Ever wonder why the focus of so much fighting that goes on in Iraq is always somehow, some way centered around or near or will eventually involve the city of Mosul? Why? That next when I return. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm a Spaceman. It's AVFS. Back with more in just a minute. I'm a guy they call Space. This is A View from Space, Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm just reading through some of the emails that are coming in. Jay Ann writes, my husband and I are tuned in right now. He listens to your show every Saturday. He gives me his name. Where do you get your topics for your shows each week, and how do you research? Thanks. I rely on history. Yeah. Every single bit of history, because I believe history is repeating itself. GG writes, fascinating view of the other side of everything. I'm sending this to be counted as one of the listeners. For the sake of life and time, as we haven't known, this show must go on. And I believe he's right, because no one else is telling it quite this way. Everyone else seems to be very afraid of losing their job or not being politically correct. You know what I think about politically correct? I believe those words are basically just a disguise for thought police. Yeah. You don't think the way you should if you're not politically correct. In other words, rein in your own personal thoughts and go with the herd. Go with the majority. Go with everyone else. You see, individualism is now shunned. They don't want you being an individual, having individual, independent thought. They want you to be like everyone else. You'd be part of the herd. So as I said before the break, Mosul. Why? They've even broadcast it. Unprecedented. To come out and say, hey, well, we're thinking, no, we're not thinking. We've already planned an attack, and it's coming in a few months. It's not like saying to your enemy, why don't you get prepared? There's going to be an attack coming. Well, of course it is. But you see, the Illuminati never get into a fight if they don't control both sides. If you can't control both sides, don't get into the fight, because you can't control the outcome. So there is a plan to attack ISIS And right now it's Iraqi Kurdish force, 25,000 only. But if they're not ready, and hey, God knows they've been trying to get these Afghani armies and these Iraqi armies ready for how many years now? It's a ruse. Yeah, it is. They want in there so bad they can taste it. Because where they enter, they never, ever leave. They haven't pulled everything out of Iraq. And what else has been going on is they've been leaving equipment, military equipment, behind so that the enemy can take it over and use it. It's almost like a numbered bank account slipping it to ISIS. Hey, here's where your next checks are coming from to buy stuff you need. Here's the bank account number. So have you ever wondered why the focus of so much fighting that goes on in Iraq has always involved Mosul somehow? Well, here's why. It's the most important city in all of Iraq, in all of the Middle East, except for Jerusalem, to the Illuminati. The first ever mention of Mosul in Iraq today was by Xenophon, the Greek historian, soldier, mercenary too, and student of Socrates. This is way back in history, back in 401 BC in Xenophon's expeditionary logs. He once wrote of it as a small town known as Mephisla. That's what Mosul was originally called. Mephisla. Now, once the Tigris, right where modern Mosul is today, right on the Tigris river bank, was Mephisla. In fact, the name Mephisla is the root for the modern name of Mosul as we know it today. Now, the Bible, King James Version of the Bible, says that Nineveh was founded by Nimrod, son of Cush, built the Tower of Babel there. The origin of the name Nineveh originally meant the seat of Ishtar, who is also Isis. Her headquarters was there, in Nineveh, Mephisla. Nineveh originally meant the seat of Ishtar, who is Isis. It's her headquarters. Her original temple site was located at Nineveh, Mephisla. Today, that city has changed its name again after another empire took her over. It's now called Mosul. So that's why the Illuminati love Mosul and will fight over Mosul so often. ISIS's throne is located there from the ancient times. You see, Nina was one of the Babylonian names of the goddess Isis, Ishtar, same personality. Yes, Nineveh, meant the seat of Isis, the seat of Ishtar. To the Christians, Nineveh's known as the burial ground of Jonah, the man who was swallowed by the whale. Nineveh became renamed Mephisla after its violent fall to the Babylonians, the Medes, who were the ancestors of the ancient Kurds. And who do we have attacking again? The Iraqi Kurdish force of 25,000 is the headline reading of 2015. Almost 4,000 years ago, they're still fighting over the throne seat of ISIS. First called Mephisla, then to Nineveh, then to Mosul. Nineveh became renamed Mephisla after its violent fall to the Babylonians. They were the ancient ancestors of the Kurds, who are going to be the army that is going to attack ISIS in May or June. Yes, ironic, isn't it? 4,000 years still fighting that same battle. So here's what's so fascinating right now as I speak to you at this moment. The only inhabited parts of the otherwise protected archaeological site of Nineveh within its surviving ancient walls are Kurds, the descendants of the Medes, the very same ones who conquered Nimrod and renamed the city. How about that? Absolutely incredible, isn't it? Now, the Harappans and Sumerians, different politically, different culturally. While the Sumerians developed the world's first monarchy, the Harappans may have developed the first democracy. The Sumerians, I tell you many times on this show, AVFS, Talk Radio AM 640, the Illuminati believe they are half men, half gods that originally came from another planet, landed on Earth, mated with human women, and their bloodline was formed. These ancient Sumerians believe these aliens are the beginning of their civilization, and they're the ones that developed the first monarchy. The Harappans, on the other hand, developed the first democracy. Very little evidence has been found of a king in the Indus Valley. Only one white priest king idol and a silver crown. Not enough to establish the royalty, were the rulers. Instead, the empire was divided into regions, with a half a dozen cities functioning as capitals, and was governed by a group of people. Archaeologist Jonathan Mark Cunayet, who speculated that the Harappan rulers were merchants, ritual specialists, and individuals controlling important resources, instead of just one social group controlling the rest. From the construction of the cities, though, it does appear that there was some social classes. In the citadel, usually 20 feet higher in the middle and higher than the middle and the lower part of the town. So someone lived on the hill. The Sumerians, on the other hand, developed into city-states ruled by a priest king. The king led the military. He was the head of all trade. The king was the judge in all disputes. And the king performed certain important religious ceremonies. The king also had a bureaucracy which considered to be, well, family members only. And they were made up of the priest kings. The Sumerians declared that the king was divinely selected, you see. But later this changed, and eventually they came up with the idea that, well, the king himself was divine and worthy of worship. So while the Sumerians worshipped their king, the Harappans chose not to glorify any particular person, but were instead ruled by ordinary people. The economies were pretty similar between the Sumerian and Harappan civilizations. Both relied heavily on trade. In fact, they appear to have traded with one another a lot. In records found in Mesopotamia, there's mention of a civilization they traded with in the area of the Indus Valley, and many Indus seals for which they're well known have been found in Mesopotamia. The Sumerians exported mostly textiles, cloth, and crops, while the Harappans traded in lumber, copper, gold, ivory, which were bought by the Sumerian royalty. And remember, the Harappans were the first to use cotton for garments. It must have been beautiful for the Sumerian royalty to receive those gifts. Both civilizations made great advances in transportation in order to carry their merchandise with a lot greater ease and more of it. The Sumerians appear to have developed the wheel and possibly the sailboat. And the Harappans developed ox carts and small flat-bottom boats, which were used for commercial purposes. But you notice the Sumerians, I call the water kings, who would sail to other ports, attack, and plant their flag, and spread their empire. The Sumerians, the origin of the water kings, developed the sailboat. Space, back with more. The other side of the break. Talk Radio AM 640. This is A View from Space. That's all it is. It's Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. PM writes, yes, it is slavery. I see it here in Canada with the construction oil industry, with workers from other countries working hard under a shroud of fear, while locals are shut out, underpaid, and blessed with the false reports from the Illuminati-controlled mass media that there is a skilled worker shortage, when it's the farthest thing from the truth. Also, RG writes, no one is greater than another. We are all needed and intertwined. For the Illuminati, it's them that need us. We give them power unknowingly by the mass ignorance and selfishness. That's exactly what my show is about tonight. Remember, I asked the question at the beginning of the show, and I'll ask it throughout the evening while I'm on the air. The question was, are you one of those people who accept the world as it's being presented? So to give you an idea of how things go, how things always have gone, you just have to look back into a little history and you see the same thing. I mean, after all, isn't what the Harappans and the Sumerians that I'm talking about tonight bickered over, fought over? One a kingly order, another a democratic order, pitting one against the other. Isn't that what's happening today? I mean, let's take, for instance, Syria, Assad. A king, really. It's the president. Yeah, they have elections, but really, he's a king. It's the royal family of Syria. And the West wants to bring democracy while hiding behind the royals in Britain. Interesting, isn't it? Oh, they're just figurehead. Not so fast. No, they're not. So, controlling the politics and controlling, which is the government, and controlling the banks, you can pit one side against another and have them fight it out. And when it comes to religion, well, you can use religion to pit one side against the other, which is what the Third World War is going to be about. Ideological war. Not about territory. Not about taking businesses over. Not about resources. It's about who God is. One side says God's name is this. The other side says God's name is that. And that's what the war will be. Back in history, we know little about the Sumerian religion, and even less about the Harappan religion. But we do know that both civilizations were polytheistic. The Sumerians believed in a lot of gods that were human-like, with human emotions. They believed that the sun, the moon, the stars were gods, and everything that happened was controlled by one of the gods. According to the Sumerian religion, humans were created to serve the gods, and the gods controlled their destinies. Because they believed the gods controlled them, they sought ways to discover what the gods held in store for them. By doing this, they invented astrology, another guide of the Illuminati, as well as numerology and sacred geometry, that eventually led to the invention of the lunar calendar. They also studied the inner organs of sacrificed animals to predict the future. To worship their gods, the Sumerians built the ziggurats, large temples which were architectural wonders in those days. One of those temples is found in the ancient city of Ur, where the moon god, Nana, was said to have lived in a little house at the top of the ziggurat. The lesser gods, who did not have enormous temples built for them, were idols and statues which were worshipped in homes. Since the Indus script hadn't been deciphered apart from the bathhouse in Mohenjo-Daro, there were no religious structures there. Very little evidence for the beliefs and practices of the Harappans. Now, what we know is from figurines and seals, many of which depict a horned goddess with the sacred pipal tree. Now remember the Disney show, the movie that was out earlier this year, well, last year now, Maleficent. Well, Maleficent was Isis, the horned goddess, and this is who they worshipped. It indicates the worship of a mother goddess who presided over fertility, birth, and the dead. Isis, Ishtar. The use for purification rites, possibly ceremonial bathing before ritual cohabitation with prostitutes in the small antechamber took place. Isis and Ishtar were the head of a sexual religion. And because of the lack of religious structures in the Indus Valley, it was very hard to discover as much about their religion as has been discovered about the Sumerian religion. I believe history is being manipulated, hidden from us. The certain things that they want us to know, we have access to. We have a lot of access about the Sumerian religion, which, of course, purports that the Sumerian people were originally from outer space, the elites of the Sumerian culture, who led it. Half men, half God, the Illuminati of today. Ishtar, Isis, once a year would sleep with the king of the country. If she was pleased, he remained king for another year. If she was displeased, a new king was found after the old king was slain. And of course, in those trysts through the years with Isis and Ishtar in her temple of sex, there were births. Those were the Roman emperors, the families of the ancient Roman Empire that now have their progeny in our world today manifest running the countries around the world that are powerful. The Harappan and Sumerian social structures were made up of a simple social type of ladder, yet really differed greatly when it came to the treatment of women. Exactly what's happening again today. It was just after the Second World War that women were empowered, or began to become empowered. It's sort of a newish phenomenon, because, it's not long since the Second World War was over. There are still a few people left that witnessed it alive. Like the Sumerians, the Harappan civilization had a social hierarchy. Mesopotamia, the highest class, consisted of nobles, priests, and important officers, and sort of the highest classes of the Indus Valley, although the priests and scholars were considered slightly higher than the noblemen. The priests and the scholars, we're talking about enlightenment here, slightly higher than the ordinary rich man, but was used, the priests and scholars were used and manipulated by the noblemen, the elite rich of that day. Space, back with more on the other side of the break at Talk Radio, AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm going to get a call Space. This is AVFS, Talk Radio, AM 640. As you're probably aware, if you're a regular listener, I communicate by email only. I have a couple of addresses. One of them is space@640toronto.com. The other, spaceman@640toronto.com. And KR checks in from Medellin, Colombia, with a greeting just saying where in the world he's listening to the show from. If you've got information you'd like to send along, use those addresses. If you've got a critique of the show, or if you're like my emailer from Medellin, Colombia, just checking in to say hi and where in the world he is, feel free. So I was saying before the break, the Harappan, Sumerian social structures of two cultures, socially different, but made up of similar social ladders to climb. But they really split apart when it came to their treatment of women. They had a social hierarchy, both of them. Mesopotamia, the highest class, were nobles, then the priests and important officers, as did the highest classes in the Indus Valley, although the priests and scholars were considered slightly higher than the noblemen. The middle class was the same in both civilizations and contained the merchants, the farmer, the landowner, the craftsman. The last class, the lower class, the poor class, however, very different. The Sumerians had slaves that made up the last class, but slavery in Mesopotamia was not the same as the rest of the world. Instead of being differentiated by race, it was considered a misfortune. And a slave could free himself through 3 years of service. In the Indus Valley, though, the lowest class contained the servants, workers, wage earners, who performed the task no one else wanted to do. Has the world changed at all? The answer, of course, is no. History is repeating itself, though. Where the two civilizations differed socially was their treatment of women. In the Indus Valley, the men were the head of the house and could do whatever they wanted with their wife and with their child or their children. Women could do nothing if their husband did not permit it. In Mesopotamia, women were free to buy, sell, attend legal matters for absent men, own property, borrow, lend, get into business. High-status women could even learn to read and write and were given considerable administrative authority. Women were not considered equal with men in Mesopotamia, but they were respected and given considerably more power. So while both civilizations had similar social hierarchies, the Sumerians treated their women with a lot more respect than the Harappans did. The Sumerians, Harappans, both advanced leaps and bounds in the areas of science, math, writing, but in different ways. At first, both civilizations used pictographs to depict their spoken words, but the Sumerians advanced even further by developing writing, wedge-shaped cuneiform writing. They replaced pictures with symbols and added symbols for spoken sounds, developing phonetic letters. In the scientific and mathematical realm, while the Sumerians were concerned with studying the stars and developed the 12-month lunar calendar and the zodiac to measure time, the Harappans advanced to the accurate measurements of length and the accurate measurements of mass. They developed the first standardized system of weights and measures. Their measures were extremely precise, too, the smallest division being the equivalent of like 1.7 millimeters. They carefully planned their cities and the building of their houses to make them symmetrical. They also developed a sewage and a drainage system. They had plumbing more advanced than any of those in the Middle East, today even. In the technological realm, both civilizations once again made great advances technologically. Sumerians developed the water clock, the wheel, the plow, while the Harappans invented a way to produce copper, bronze, tin, and also lead. It's impossible to decide which civilization advanced more intellectually because they both advanced so much in different areas. And we benefited greatly from both cultures, as history proves out now, and took some of their garbage too, like astrology is still around, numerology. Artistically, it's easier to determine that the Harappans were more advanced, while most Sumerian art was strictly religious. The Harappans appear to have loved art simply because it was art. The Sumerians preferred mediums, were sculpting and painting. They also inlaid and enriched wood with scenes made of shells and semi-precious stones and did relief carvings in stone, but almost always these pieces of art were for their gods. The Harappans celebrated all art. They did the opposite, but especially the art of dancing, painting, plastic arts, pottery, modeling, weaving, metalworking. They were very skilled in those areas. Their pottery was very high quality, with surprisingly beautiful designs. The anatomical detail found in their modeling are far beyond their time. Their carved seals used in trading are now considered miniature masterpieces in the art world. They were responsible for a new style of painting animals in their natural environments. It's generally accepted, too, that the Harappan art is much more advanced than any of its time, including the Sumerians. But the Harappans have been pushed out of history. All but a little mention, very little information about them. The Sumerians, an overload. I smell a manipulation in the information available. The Harappans and Sumerians both developed during about the same period in the river valleys, in the Indus River Valley. They traded with one another, had similar economies. They advanced along parallel lines in math, science, technology, but in different areas. And they were both polytheistic, believing in many gods, and were both hierarchical societies. Yet they were very different politically, artistically, and their treatment of women, as I said. Now, if you go to the Minoan cultures. You'll find the Minoans in the Aegean Sea controlled all the trade routes. They controlled all the merchandising on the sea and land. They also had indoor plumbing and central heating, much like the Harappans, and even hot water for bathing and showers. They lived an opulent lifestyle. It was just a wonderful existence for this high, ancient elite who obviously didn't create the culture themselves or the system, but simply were taught it by the elite rich before them. They got it from a previous civilization in turn. And so it now brings us up to this current empire, the one we're living in today. We're looking at people down through the ages who are intergenerational, a bloodline who passes their system on to the next group of family members. And of course, that is exactly what this is all about, because dynasties and power never give up power. When they do move, it's because it was their turn to lose in warfare, because they have turns, you see. They take turns. War is to create change, and not for what the average person thinks it's for. Space back with more on the other side of the break on Talk Radio AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm the guy to call Space. It's a view from space. That's all it is. Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thank you for the one that you sent. I really, really appreciate it. So I said, previous civilizations now make up our current empire, the one we're living in today. And down through the ages, it's intergenerational. It's a bloodline who is passing their system on to the next generation of their bloodline. And of course, that is exactly what all this is about, because dynasties and power never give it up. When they do move, it's because it was their turn to lose, as I said before the break. Yes. They take turns losing, because war isn't for what you really think it is. War is to create change. And it's also to make profit, to stay on top. So when the ones whose turn it is to lose, they will actually move to their enemy's camp, which are actually their friends, and share the spoils and bring up the children and slap the name of the country on them, and they don't care what they call the country. This is the reason, for instance, that, well, the Agnelli family, who were very good friends with Adolf Hitler and helped him in the Second World War, as a matter of fact, made aircraft and guns for him, became the owner of Fiat after the Second World War. And the Agnelli family is one of the most elite, richest families in all of Italy, even to this day. Very powerful. They own the city of Turin outright. And they've just bought Chrysler Fiat. Or actually Fiat Chrysler. The same reason the German family occupying Buckingham Palace, the Windsors, real name Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, was the enemy of Germany during World War II. The two main combatants were Britain and Germany. Cousins. The elite never, ever get massacred or wiped out with their wealth. They just move. The bloodline moves down through the ages. They bring on catastrophes to an empire when they've used that empire up. And they've already created the foundation for another one to move into. And then they flatten the old one and move on into the new one. And this has been the system on this planet for thousands of years. And it's about to happen again. You see, the trick of Darwinism is to make you think we've just been evolving since 200,000 BC. That's garbage. The whole evolution thing is actually Masonic doctrine. It's nothing to do with what we think it's meant to be. It's a Masonic doctrine. An 1859 book states it. It's called On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life, known worldwide just as The Origin of Species. Established evolution by common descent as the dominant scientific explanation of diversification in nature. For that he is made a fellow of the Royal Society. Charles Darwin made a royal fellow. He continued his research and wrote a series of books on plants, animals, including humankind, the descent of man, and the selection of relaxation, the expression of the emotions in man and animals, another book. He's also given the ultimate royal salute. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, close to, of all people, Sir John Frederick William Herschel, 1st Baronet, Knight in the Guelphic Order of the Royal House of Hanover. He was an English mathematician and astronomer. He was the son of astronomer William Herschel. Herschel originated the use of the Julian day system in astronomy. The Julian day, or Julian day number, is the number of days that have elapsed since Monday, January 1, 4713 BC. In what's now called the proleptic Julian calendar. That day is counted as Julian day 0, January 1, 4713 BC. Herschel was a member of the Royal Guelphic Order, sometimes also referred to as the Hanoverian Guelphic Order. It was a British order of chivalry instituted way back in 1815 by Prince Regent, later George IV of England. And it's not been given to anyone by the British Crown since the death of King William IV in 1837. I wonder if it will be awarded soon. Because, you see, we have a new William, Prince William. On the morning of Prince William's wedding, Queen Elizabeth II conferred the titles Duke of Cambridge, as you well know, as well as Kate getting the Duchess of Cambridge designation. He was also conferred the Earl of Strathern, Baron Carrickfergus upon William. Once he becomes heir to the throne, and he is only second in line, Charles being first, his father, it's highly likely, though, that he will be invested as the Prince of Wales also when he becomes heir to the throne. Although that is not automatic, because sometimes there is a Prince of Wales and sometimes there is not. You see, I believe all of the consternation, all of the problems, all of the troubles of the world are emanating from the city of London, the square mile, where all of the judicial and all of the financial headquarters of the world are in London, and Chatham House, the business office of the current Prince of Wales, is where it's all emanating from. Now, If William's father, Prince Charles, accedes to the throne, William being the eldest son of the sovereign, and will become Duke of Cornwall and Duke of Rothesay, but just if William succeeds to the throne and uses his first given name as his real name, he would then be known as William V. Remember, no one has been given the British crown since the death of King William IV. That's right. The Hanoverian Guelphic Order, the British Order of Chivalry, instituted in 1815 by the Prince Regent, George IV, and has not been given to anyone by the British Crown since the death of King William IV in 1837. Could it be Prince William will be the next? It was named after the House of Guelph, to which the Hanoverian kings belonged, and its insignia were based on the white horse of that kingdom's arms. Charles Darwin is also buried near Sir Isaac Newton, of all people, also a member of the Royal Society of London for the Improvement of Natural Knowledge, known simply as the Royal Society. He was an English physicist, was Sir Isaac Newton, mathematician, astronomer, alchemist, and natural philosopher who was generally seen as one of the greatest scientists and mathematicians in history. Newton wrote the Philosophiae Naturalis, the Principia Mathematica, in which he describes universal gravitation, the three laws of motion. It's where we get the entire idea of outer space from, out of his head. Because you don't know what's out there. You've never been there. You'll have to take Sir Isaac Newton's word for it. He was the first to show that the motion of objects on Earth and of celestial bodies, stars, are governed by the same set of natural laws. So Darwin, just as the others I've just mentioned, was pulled out of the hat by the Royal Society, which is a Masonic scientific establishment chartered by the British Royal Crown to exist, and he basically gave the origin of the species to justify the right of certain types to rule, and he wasn't talking about the other animals. He was talking about the elite rich over us. So evolution is a caste system. It's to verify a caste system and to reinforce it. This is, of course, taught to all the new people entering the system, the children, through schools, the brainwashing apparatus. Now you know why the Illuminati are always talking about building schools in areas that they are moving into and taking over. Space back with more, if you can take it. It's the other side of the break on Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Got some information you'd like to pass along? Want to say where in the world you're listening to the show from, or you have a critique of the show? Space640toronto.com or Spaceman at 640toronto.com. So I want to go back to the Minoans for a minute. We also know they shared, and they were part of the ancient Egyptian elite because the decorations on their walls have the same images, styles, techniques used, as you can see for yourself, inside some of the tombs in Egypt. This civilization, the Minoans, and this civilization we live in now has symbols of ancient Egypt indelibly stamped inside everyone's head. If I mentioned King Tut, you can see King Tut in your mind's eye right now. And possibly even the layout of the Valley of the Kings, where the pyramids are, pyramids of Giza and the other two. A sphinx, everyone immediately has an image come to mind. Indelibly stamped, brainwashed inside of our head. Why is Egypt such a power with symbolism? I'll give you the simple answer, because it is quite simple. Egypt is heaven to the Illuminati. By that I mean, what was once there as that sun-worshipping system with one god over all of the world as it was known in those times, which was Egypt, basically. The golden age of rule. That's what they want to go back to. Only this time encompassing, taking in the entire world, not just a part of it that was already discovered. A truly global system is coming. So a real elite wouldn't live in a place where they could easily be attacked, right? The Minoans had a front, an empire or a city, and entered it and left it. The elite rich had somewhere safe to go. It was the middle of the Aegean Sea, and we know, for instance, that in a circle in the Aegean Sea of little islands, which were left after a volcano, they had the huge island there at one time, and islands like that are the remains from the tropic volcano. It sank into the ocean, so these little fringe ones remain and become separate little islands. So that's where we get a lot of the Minoan history from. Did you know the Minoans used a double-headed axe in their religious ceremonies? Labris is the word used to describe this double-headed axe, known to the classical Greeks as pelekis or sagaris, and to the Romans as a bipenis. Representations of the labris are on Neolithic finds of old Europe, and the labris is found right through Minoan, Thracian, Greek, Byzantine art, the ancient Roman art, and mythology. The symbol of this double-edged axe is passed down through the ages, so we're looking at something the Catholic Church used thousands of years later, because Minoans were around 5,000 to 6,000 BC, and here's the same symbology used by their own Catholic Church, who simply inherited their culture from the Greeks who moved into Rome. The elite rich, of course, bought all of this symbology with them. The Greeks got it from the Minoans. So this is an endless stream of symbology and information that's being passed down through the ages, of language, which they understood very well, and which some very high Masons running our world today understand. And some people who are natural adepts can figure out themselves, but not very many. The Catholic Church used this Minoan double-headed axe with the bundle of rods around it, meaning strength was in numbers. When you get one twig, you can break that easily, right? Just with your bare hands. But you put a whole bunch of twigs together, bundle them up, and try to break that. The more in the bundle, the harder it is to break. And so the nobility, the ruling elite, must stick together at all costs, just like that. And in the middle of the bundle is the main shaft of this fasces, the actual axe itself. Now this exact symbol I have just described to you, this Minoan double-headed axe passed down through the centuries, 200,000 years old, is the exact symbol that's used in the Senate and the Congressional Hall in the United States, where all presidents, including Barack Obama today, now gives his speeches, and every other president before him. The two bundled axes on each side of the American flag are fascist symbols. The word fascist comes from the word fasces, which means a bundle of rods, and among them an axe with a projecting blade. The Senate chamber supposedly represents where the representatives of the nation of America, of democracy, meet. Yet there's a fascist symbol smack dab in the front of the room. So you have to ask yourself, symbolically, what's the fascist symbol doing in that room if it's democracy? Well, the answer is, it really isn't a democracy. They just make you think it is. Remember I asked the question? The start of the show? Said I'd remind you throughout it? Are you one of those people who accept the world as being presented to them? On either side, you'll see the fascist symbols or system, often elite encircling the center shaft, and they're all tied together. They're bound together by oaths. Oaths of blood, oaths of money, and their own secret religion. The Illuminati are creating a system going back, way back into the mists of time. Civilization to the elite is that which is abnormal. They create the abnormal. They are Luciferian, so they create abnormal things. Nothing normal can come out of Luciferianism. So what we have is an artificial system which conned, the word con, from Cain, Khan, king, all comes from the same root word of priest. They conned people to use money, and then, of course, built their cities. The Masons are, after all, the builders of the world. They also hire people for a standing army. You can't get a bunch of guys together to go and conquer anybody, and if you don't have some means of keeping them there, some kind of reward, they'll just go home eventually. So money is always the key to civilizations. This building process and tearing down, destroying, the building again of cities, empires, society itself. Freemasons like Albert Pike and a whole bunch of others are always extolling their own virtues of being able to build society, build culture. In Middle Ages, where they built their cathedrals and their big, huge churches and so on, they'd often build them either next to or on top of the old existing ones that they have destroyed. And so they're building new on top of the old. The old age, the old system, their old civilization is buried and demolished as they're building up the new one right smack on top of it. We're being ruled by an elite who've used war, money, cities, culture creation, culture destruction, religion, and all the things that come into cultural festivals, generally based on lunar and solar and stellar mythologies, to keep you and I, the people, in check. Keep them happy, dumbed down, stupid, obedient, more than anything else, because obedience is so important. The sun god was one of the greatest ones they've used down through the ages right up to the present day, and it's a reincarnated sun god, you see. It's the same old thing rehashed over and over, where the invisible God of the grand architect of the universe, as the Masons call him, chooses a son to his own son to push life into the world, because they claim that without it, we, the profane, couldn't get along, couldn't exist. We would be dead. We need the rich. That's what they said at Davos, at their economical summit a few weeks ago. I had it on the show. Talk Radio, AM 640 AVFS. I'm the guy that calls space. It's a View from Space. Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to Spaceman at 640toronto.com. A very stimulating topic tonight has brought a lot of mail my way. The other address, Spaceman at 640toronto.com. And thanks for the one that you sent. Let me just get right back on point here with the Illuminati claiming that without them, they are, well, so indispensable to us because of their elite stature and their knowledge and their power and their money, create all the jobs for us. If they didn't exist, there would be no jobs. Hardly. I have to ask the question again. Are you one of those people who actually accept this world that way as it's been presented to you just now? That the absolute necessity is for the rich to be amongst us? There has to be an elite rich? Why? They think we would be dead. Us, the ones they call the profane, would be dead without them. And in a sense, in only one sense, they're right. Because if you don't know reality and are accepting the world as they present it to you, then you are dead. Because a living human being means you're a sentient, aware, fully conscious being. You know, they are laughing at you. You're following the zombie genre in the movie business, watching the zombie shows. That's you, the Walking Dead, the ones who are brainwashed, the ones who are accepting the world as it's being presented to them through the eyes of the Illuminati-controlled mass media. So you'll find in all religions they have the same terminology, and you'll find in Christianity to where Jesus says to the guy, let the dead bury the dead. And ministers don't dwell on that because they can't really fathom it out. How can those that are walking around bury the dead? Let the dead bury the dead, is the line. It's because life doesn't mean you're animated, which is the big con today. Everybody's rushing around in their cars as fast as they can go, and they think they're living because they keep moving. They've just got to keep moving and have noise blaring all the time and music playing or something. The screen, their smartphone, you see, because they're scared to think. And those who don't think for themselves are classified as the Walking Dead, zombies in all ages. George Orwell even used that in his 1984 book, where Winston and his girlfriend are caught by the thought police before being taken to the Ministry of Love for torture. And that's exactly what he says when they're caught. We are the dead. We are the dead. That's a little Masonic giveaway, meaning that if they hadn't been really alive, they would have never been caught like that. And of course, there are many, many degrees of waking up from the dead. And in Freemasonry, they have a substitute. There's a bunch of rungs on a ladder called degrees in Masonry for the initiates to join in at the bottom, thinking that one day they're going to finally, one day, ascend to the very top and receive virtue. Virtue. Right. They're taught virtue. Virtue, you see, is from the Latin virtus, meaning moral excellence of a person. A virtue is a character trait valued at being good. The conceptual opposite of virtue, of course, is vice. The Greek word arete has not come into ordinary English. The English word virtue is taken from the Latin word virtus, which is in turn from vir, meaning man in the masculine sense. The word virtus means the male function, conceived in strength or force. So it means the power to accomplish. The unrelated Latin word vis, vis, means simply power or violence. Ancient grammarians were unable to distinguish those two words, by the way. And all these guys who've done everything and everybody else has done suddenly got virtue. And they think, okay, I'm very high up in Masonry. I've got virtue. Well, they've got virtue as they reward contracts to their rich friends from their positions of power, and pay each other off, and take all the freebies from society, parasites of the profane, to live on. The predators, soliciting an army of men whose sole ambition in life is motivated by power and greed, because who else would want to join a society with secrets, as they call themselves, without knowing what it's all about? All would be initiates. No. That's what the Masons make sure that everyone's understanding is, that if you join, you get up the ladder in life. You get little special favors. So this is the kind of thing you see in Freemasonry. This is the kind of thing you see in the business world. This is the kind of thing you see with the Illuminati playing the power game. They, the people who want all the little freebies, and it doesn't matter to them if they, well, destroy their neighbor, or if their neighbor gets hurt or crushed in the process, doesn't matter if he's suffering. They're the profane, remember? The uninitiated, remember? That's the Masonic creed. That's the Illuminati way. It's a scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. This just happened with HSBC, whose huge bank has been, well, doing all kinds of totally criminal things with the money. And even involved in terrorism, but all swept under the carpet, and the man responsible, HSBC, doing that, ends up with a very cushy job at the BBC. Promoted. Someone comes in and ruins a corporation and they have to cut all kinds of jobs and shrink. Promoted. sits on 4 or 5 or 6 other boards with a 6-figure salary from each and every single board he sits on. So what we have now is an endless seam of merchandising, money lending, interest gathering institutions controlled by the elite rich going down throughout thousands of years. And intergenerational families who are taught a different reality than you and I are. Schooled differently, brought up differently. We go to the little red schoolhouses. In Britain, it's the little red brick schoolhouses, the elite refer to them. Of course, the universities for the elite rich are granite, stone. The profane go to the red brick. Way back in the 80s, former Prime Minister of Britain, Margaret Thatcher, came under fire for subsidizing private schooling for the wealthy using tax money of the peoples to subsidize the wealthy, and she rationalized it by actually telling the truth. She said, well, this is where your future leaders are coming from. Your future industrial leaders, political leaders, economists, and so on. They come from these schools, and this is where they meet each other. They'll grow up in life knowing each other, and they'll all be in the right positions. You know, what the public reaction is when they hear that, they say, I know, I heard that, but they can't really mean what they say. So, you and I are trained to react in that way. The abused are trained to love the abuser, in other words. We can't seem to get this through our heads, us the profane. And so we make excuses for the elite rich. Well, I guess people like what Margaret Thatcher said, she had a bad day to say what she said, or well, the problems that she's got on her plate. I don't blame her for saying that. You see, this is how you're trained to think. So an intergenerational elite with so many whose families, members, can be traced back to ancient Sumer, are dealing with the legal system in real estate, subdivisions of real estate and wills, death duties, and holding positions in government today. So this system has gone down through the ages, always taking themselves to another place, destroying that which was left behind, yet leaving it in such a way, leaving us as to leave some low-level controllers there to make sure it remains under their power. That way, when you get a bigger empire taking over, and they can create bigger and bigger empires, and this is part of the great work, as they call it. And this goes all the way back 4,500 BC. The big idea, it's called. That's code, by the way. Shakespearean code. Back with that revelation on Talk Radio AM 640 and The View from Space in just a moment. I'm the guy to call space. It's View from Space. This is Talk Radio AM 640. I communicate by email only. No cell phones. I don't own a cell phone. I have no Twitter account. I have no Facebook page. I have no net presence. I choose not to look at screens all day. I choose the world of reality. I like real life. I like interfacing with people, communicating with people, eye contact, stuff like that. Simple stuff. So if you'd like, email me, space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. JL writes, George Carlin said it best, Space. Our fascism won't come with jackboots. It'll come with Mickey Mouse and smiley faces. Emoticons. Yes, that is what I wanted to explain before I took the break. The big idea. It's code. The code is really the great work. It's code for the great work. The elites run a system down through the ages, always taking themselves to another place out of that system, destroying that system they just left, yet leaving it in such a way as to leave some low-level controlling behind. It's just as the Commonwealth countries are run, for example, by the governments that are put in place. But still, the monarchy controls the Commonwealth countries. Just like the troops that they leave in Iraq. They say they're training Iraqi army soldiers for their army. But they leave a low-level group of controllers remaining there to keep it under their power. That way, when you get a bigger empire taking over and create a bigger and bigger empire after that, this is part of the great work, as it's called, or the big idea. Oh, and by the way, the to be or not to be, very famous expression by William Shakespeare, for those who know. The B in to be is spelt not B-E, but B-E-E, as in beehive. To be or not to be, to build a better beehive or not to exist at all. To be or not to be. So now we go down through the ages until we see their target becoming more clear. It's the age of Aquarius. That's their target. The many reasons for Aquarius being Aquarius. First off, even in the New Testament, because Jesus was the sign of the Pisces of fish, fisher of men, the first men he recruits were fishermen. The philosopher king, Pythagoras, used the fish symbol whenever they went as a sign of Christianity. Before Christianity, they used the cross. And in fact, the cross was used for the inner circle of the elite because it's always, the cross has always been an esoteric symbol for the public. And the real meaning known only by the initiates of the secret society. So the cross was always used as a symbol for sun worship. But the fish, of course, was for the public consumption or the profane. The age of Aquarius is supposedly of peace and understanding, right? Well, it's peace, but not the peace as you might think or know. Peace comes when there's an absence of consciousness and opposition to the agenda. Let me say that again, slower. Peace comes when the absence of consciousness and opposition to this agenda. No opposition and no consciousness. That's what the elites, the Illuminati, mean by peace. Peace comes when there's not enough of us to cause problems, and those that are left don't have a functioning brain to use anyway. That's peace. So this is why the rush toward chips and chipping the brain and implants and things like that in a totally controlled society. The brains of the citizens interfaced with computers. That's programming. That's where the research and development is really going. I asked the same question again. The recurring question of the evening. Are you one of those people who accept the world as it's being presented to them now. The brains of the citizen interfaced with computers. You talk about programming. Brainwashing at a new level. The Illuminati want peace. They don't want to give us all this media covering up their tracks. This constant propaganda having to keep us running in circles. They want 100% profit from us, but right now they've got to allow us to entertain ourselves, trying to keep us obedient using sports, bread and circuses, and buying toys. Junk. The rewards? Little Pavlovian rewards at the end of the month. That's all taken from their ultimate profit. And that upsets them because they're not efficient enough. And the system that's coming into being, their new world order, the new economy, will have complete and utter efficiency, where a person will not be born unless they have a work for you. Yes, right. You will not come into the world unless there is a job for you to do. They're eliminating us right now. The economy is changed. The workforce is being sat down, and the machines have taken over. They're eliminating the profane. They don't need the working masses any longer. The machines do it. So now the real economy is in pushing paper through the stock exchange. $85 billion per month in America since 2008 has been printed. It's all gone not to create jobs, not to build infrastructure in the country, not to do anything but to buy more paper on the stock exchange, which is setting record after record after record. Oh, and Sotheby's selling a vase for $330 million and a Picasso painting for another $85 million. That's the new economy. We're eliminated. Space back with more on the other side of the break. It's Talk Radio AM 640. They got to call Space. Emails spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. RG writes, how fitting on your topic of people brainwashing enslavement that this is a recent Chinese New Year celebration and it's the year of the sheep. Signed RG. We are the sheep. They are the good shepherds. Good shepherds, you see, stroke the sheep. They know them all by name. They know all of our names and all of our numbers. The sheep come up to them and like them because sheep don't know what they're there for. They think that they're there to be happy. They don't know. They don't even ask why. Does the shepherd spend so much care and talk to us? It's because the sheep don't know what they're there for. They don't know their function is to feed the shepherd. You get me? Make a profit as they take the wool and fleece from them. And that's a good shepherd. A bad shepherd sharpens the knives in front of the sheep and slaughters one. The rest of them are terrified. They run off when they see them. So the good shepherd wears a suit and a tie and says, I promise to help you, but if whatever category you put yourself into, left wing, right wing, whatever it was, it's their system, and they lead you to where they want you to go, which is the slaughterhouse. But you're not supposed to know that until we get there. Remember, never frighten the sheep. What they do tell you is what they call in Masonry the noble lie. They give us noble lies all the time. Well, we can't tell the people the truth. They wouldn't understand. So when there's too many of them, the elite would get together, plan a war. The real push is on now for a more expert-run society than in the 1500s when the Rosicrucian movement came out into the open in Europe. In the 1700s, it really took off with all the different writers amongst the interbred elite like Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin's family interbred with one other family for generations, and that was the Wedgwood family. I don't know if you know this. The famous pottery business, the Wedgwoods of England, and his grandfather married a Wedgwood. His father married one. Charles Darwin married one. And then, when his wife died, he married his mother's sister, another Wedgwood. So they're all Wedgwoods, and Darwin's all mixed together until they bring some other outside bloodline. The Galtons, another ancient bloodline family who believed in population reduction, and so they interbred with the Darwin family. Charles Darwin had 10 kids from his first wife. She died in childbirth. One of the 2 children died in insane asylums at a very young age. I guess there was just a little too much incest. But that's part of the program initiated by the elite through Rosicrucianism, when they had to build up a middle class to manage what was coming. The industrial era needed a middle class to obedient middle class people who would in turn look down their noses at the people they just left at the bottom of the heap, the low class. So the middle class would become very snobbish. They had their own version of Masonry, not a noble order like the elite had itself, but they had a version which they didn't know there was anything else except the one they joined. They thought this was, well, I've made it. I'm finally up the mountain. That's what everyone's striving for. I mean, the guy who drives the Volkswagen Rabbit wants a BMW. Once he gets the BMW, he wants the Mercedes. We're now run by so many bureaucracies and expert non-governmental groups that speak for us, even though we don't know who the hell they are. This is who's running the world today. A world run by the natural order of things, as they call it. The intellectual elite. Those who have proven, as H.G. Wells said, they've proven through history that the wealthier families are the natural elite. They have the right to control the lesser, those who have less. We've been under tremendous mind control for such a long time. The law is under intense control. And Masonry, again, in their own publications, will tell you there's a Masonic push to have a universal education, the same education worldwide, to standardize a bunch of people who never question reality, who accept reality as it's presented to them from birth. And that's what good management means. Are you one of those people who accept the world as it's being presented to them? Look at the people coming out of colleges, universities. They wear the cloak. You see the cloak used to always be black for Saturn. Now they use red ones. I've noticed they're very popular. I saw a pinkish red, actually, which is even more telling for both sexes. And if you're an architect, you see, or an engineer, you understand technical drawings. So you see things in a way differently from other people because most people see the solid front of an object. They don't see the different aspects, the front view, the top view, the side view. They can't put a picture in their minds. But the architect does. And of course, when you're wearing a little hat as the brick masons call it, is to use a hod where they carry the bricks up the ladder. That's what they put them on. That square. That a person who's graduating a college, you know the square hat that they use? It's called a hod. Or a little hod, as the brick masons call it. It carries the bricks up the ladder. They set them on the square. The squaring of the head. So the round head is not natural. But when the education institution puts the graduation hat on you, you become perfect. You become a square head. And it's flat. The ashlar, as they call it in Masonry, is now perfected. So nature wasn't good enough. By themselves, they will perfect nature, and that's what they say in Masonry. They're here to perfect that which is less perfect. Well, that means everything, including you. So, you look from the top view, of course, on these little square heads and people with the gowns and dresses, and you'll see that. You see the square, and if you were to see the head, and then you think you see square in the circle within the middle of the squaring of the circle, you see, that's what it all means. The squaring of the circle. Your head is the circle. The squaring is the hat that goes on your head as you graduate. The squaring of your brain. A brick in the wall. And it really means that you've got a quality approval stamp on you by those who run the system. That they've dumbed you down, programmed you, and now you're stupid enough to graduate, to work in their system, and fork over 40 to 50% of your earnings to them in tax. I know there's someone out there right now listening to me singing, "All together now. All we are is just another brick in the wall." In the old days, they needed slave drivers. Slave drivers take away from profit. Who watches the slave drivers? You see, today we're self-maintained slaves through money. Yeah. That we think is natural simply because it exists in our time when we live. And that's how easy it is to control us. We're self-maintained slaves. We're trained for one thing, and that's work in a system to produce and consume. And whether you're producing or consuming with all the sales taxes, you're still paying a lot of tax money, and of course that goes back to the elite, of course, who uses the money for big projects, which we all supposedly call public projects, big, huge projects like building railroads across continents, gasworks, oil refineries, waterworks, roads. And then when we have it all working and all the problems ironed out, they sell it to each other for peanuts. That's called progress. And all the elite rich keep doing it. People watch this down through the centuries, and Europe, as these huge projects were built up by the taxpayer, we're all working for the common good, we're told. The common good, and then, hey, one day, they'll tell you you can't go on like this, you know, it's too expensive. We need to have more professional people with a motive, a profit motive to take care of us, an incentive to make things work so they could pick it up for a raffle. And, of course, one of the handful of elite Masonic buddies gets to win it for the next to nothing price. It's never defined to us exactly what we're going to do, where we're going, and that's not by chance. Although it is told you through movies and novels, the books, and even songs, because it's called predictive programming, because you must be introduced to what they've got in store, what's coming down the pipe, so it'll be eventually accepted when it does come. And they do it all the time. I'm Space. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. More next. Other guy to call Space, it's Talk Radio, AM 640. Email me at spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Unusually, a lot of mail filling up my inbox tonight. Might have touched a nerve. But many will tell you that do listen regularly. That happens every week. Plato once described the whole technique of predictive programming, and he thought that was a new term, right? No, Plato described it, the whole technique. Today we call it a form of indoctrination, predictive programming, which means that through fiction or through anything, you're enjoying yourself, you're being entertained undercover. Enter, tain. Tain comes from tin, meaning the cover. When you're under the cover, your sense or part of your mind is not working. And if it's not working, you're unaware that you're being programmed, like your hard drive. And they have all sorts of little emotional techniques they use. For instance, you're identified with a hero. Once you start identifying with the characters, say in a television show or a movie, they've got you because they can take you anywhere, no matter what that character does, because as long as you identify with them, they can then take you where they want you to go emotionally. And so, when real things start happening in your own life, you say, well, this is kind of familiar to me, and you don't object to it because you're thinking, well, I guess it's the only way I could go in this particular situation. How many times have you heard or have even said it yourself? It's true. Well, I saw this movie one time where this guy, blah, blah, blah. And you rationalize it through a piece of predictive programming that's still in your head. Identifying with the fictitious characters. I guess it's natural evolution, but when your mind was prepared, because these guys are the shepherds, you know, they've got another bunch of slaves and scientists that work for them who do the mind control, and they farm you to an extent. First of all, they know where they want to grow in this field with the crop. They want to grow and how high and how many, and they're the first to prepare the land. They cut the brush, they plow it, they harrow it, they do all the necessary groundwork, and then they sow the seeds and watch it grow and cultivate it. Watch what they do with your mind in preparation for every event that will happen in your life, in every major event in your life. You'll see in all through the movies, especially on this day and age of the last century. It was primarily in the 20th century. Going into the 21st century here now, it was mostly through novels in the last century and stage plays and music halls. But today, it's on everybody's television or movie theater or smartphone screen. The one-eyed set is the eye of Lucifer, you know. They tell you the tale and then they programming it right into you for entertainment, you think. And then you see it happening in your own life and you think, well, I guess that's okay. It's sort of natural, isn't it? And you don't think any more beyond that. Where did the idea come from in the first place? It's marketed to you through your entertainment. And that's the prime reason you're being entertained and being solicited to be entertained constantly. It's not enough for you to sit down and just have music while you chew your grass like good little sheep do. It's to program you. And that's why you have to have big bucks to get into the entertainment industry. You have to have big bucks broadcasting. And you must be qualified, and being a very high degree Mason, one of the prerequisites, who knows the score, as they say, because they can't just let anybody do this important job. Plato said that thousands of years ago, culture is created from the top and put down to the people. You're taught it comes from the grassroots, but it doesn't, because they can't allow anything to come up from the grassroots because it's not in their plans. They never tell the consequences of the chaos they portray in our entertainment. No, they never tell the consequences of the chaos. And your entertainment is full of it. The bad guys get away with it all the time. So everything comes down from the top in this culture creation business, and it's always been that way in civilization. What normality was, we haven't got a clue anymore. The Illuminati and their system, the ancient system of money, chronology, the priesthoods, and merchandising, rulerships, of course, all comes from the ruler. Culture is created from the top and put down to the people. Even the ruler they use in school. Everything is Masonic terminology. Cain is the same thing, too. He's a priest. He's also a builder. Cain was the first skilled craftsman, the first scientist who made things with metals, also weaponry, and you have a ruler. A Cain is also a ruler. They use it, the bulrushes, to make rulers in the ancient Middle East. They use the cane. So the rulers rule us, and they measure us. And a good ruler weighs us in the balance, as they say. And if you're found wanting, he won't have you around, because wants efficiency, remember? And that's where we're going today, with pure efficiency. Eliminating the workforce almost. Totally. Now, when you listen to the elite talk, if you ever mix amongst them, you'll hear them discuss this kind of stuff quite freely. Oh, the people need us. The masses, the peasants, the profane, yeah, they need us. It's like saying, again, as I said at the start of the show, the mice in the field need the hawk. And so they rationalize this crap. Hey, I saw a great bumper sticker not long ago. You know what it said? The world, it was just after the huge crash in '08. The world can no longer afford the elite rich. I thought that was kind of correct. They can never look at themselves honestly, because good psychopaths and psychopaths cannot look at themselves honestly, because, you see, they run on ego, super ego. That's why they're psychopaths. And they get their way regardless of the consequences to anyone around them, because they have no empathy for others. Maximize shareholder value. The hell with jobs. The hell with families. The hell with giving a family an income so that they can grow and prosper and spread out their tent. No. The hell with that. They can't look at themselves honestly. Oh, they can work together as long as they're working towards a common goal and they're always sharing the loot, but time obviously comes when the good psychopaths have to turn on each other too. And it will eventually come one day as the throne of the world comes into sight, and each one wants his name chiseled in stone, as these guys always do. A statue and his name chiseled in stone. He's the first king of the whole entire planet, and they're all chomping at the bit to get it. So, the cooperation won't last forever with them either. Population control councils, held in Britain under Thomas Malthus, way back as early as the 1700s. If you don't think they're culling the masses today, you are wrong. You must be one of those people, then, who accept the world as it's being presented to them. They're not trying to cure any of your diseases. They're trying to give them to you. Yes, culling, way back as early as the 1700s, to get rid of the excess people through disease, creating housing schemes built on swamplands, unhealthy areas, stuff like that. Look what they did to the American Indian, the Canadian Indian, the Aboriginal people. Put them in areas where they can't eat very well, and the climate isn't the best, and the swamp-eating mosquitoes or whatever the plagues break out, and they had it worked out under Malthus that the poorhouses that they created, where they threw you in when you were broke, or you owed money, as most folks did. They rented in Britain, for instance, in Europe, and if you don't have money, they threw you in debtor prison, which cost you more money, by the way. That was added to what you owed. And then they kicked you into the poorhouse where you were forced to work until you died because you didn't last long there. In the poorhouse, most women and children lasted 6 to 8 months at the most. This is called a more efficient way of disposing of the poor unfortunates, as they called them. I'm telling you history. I'm not making this up. This is real history, which isn't hidden. But no one wants to look. No one wants to find it. No one wants to talk about it. It's not a nice drama, like a docudrama like TV or Anne of Green Gables on your screen. All the trash they feed you, because people get most of their history today through romantic novels and porn and killing one another and mayhem. Yes, the great work, almost completed. For most people, it was a horror show of the 1800s and 1900s. In the new millennium, the elite view the completion of this great work. The one world government, perfection, heaven on earth, with them in charge. It's Talk Radio AM 640. I'm Space. Back with more right after this. The guy they call Space. This is a View from Space. Talk Radio AM 640. Final segment in tonight's show. You know the one that started 4,500 BC, where they see themselves running the world in a scientific way. The natural order of the stupid ones won't exist if they're too stupid, and there'll be no free thought or free opinion. And we see it all today with all the political correctness, all this kind of stuff being forced down your throats. Your country is changing, your laws are changing, and no one likes what they're changing to. But they've given excuses in the Illuminati-controlled mass media for the reasons why it has to change to that, and people are going, oh, okay, I guess so, if it's for my own good. Well, it isn't. We're having this stuff forced down our throats. It's actually being implemented, and unfortunately, we ourselves are our own worst enemy. It's like the Matrix 1 flick. I mean, they showed you this movie a long time ago. They show you in the Matrix movie, since the elite themselves ultimately give you those movies, you're cheering on the guy you think's the good guy. But you've got it all mixed up. This is themselves they're talking about. The new and Neo-Anderson, Andra, from the Greek word andros, meaning man. That's Neo-Anderson is the name of the man in the movie, meaning the new son of man, because andros means man. Neo is son of. The new Messiah, the Superman with all the superpowers. You see, that's where Superman comes from. It's the superpowers. And the sun was the source of Superman's power, by the way, because these people are sun worshippers. That's what gets us into the next age, they believe. The sun. Solar power. Those who can't do that, see that, will not be allowed into the next age. And it's no coincidence. It's identical, this Freemasonry with the European elite. There is no coincidence. It's identical with dualistic theology. It's a caste system. There's a Hinduism at the end of the ages. Those who are unworthy to come into the next world, next system, must perish. They must not be allowed into the next age. And so we see the massive spraying in the skies. We see all the inoculations, vaccines being dished out, people getting sicker, adolescent arthritis now. Inoculations, more and more of them, all the time, and the propaganda on TV that we're fed through. It's always law, or hospital, or drama, or detectives on your television set, DNA swap testing and all that stuff. It's all training you. It's all programming you. It's all propaganda to make you obey the authorities, these specialists. Peace means no opposition. Wow, the DNA, the scientific techniques they're coming up with now, finding things out, it's training you to accept this as a natural order of things, because it's not anything like a reality at all. But it is good entertainment, it is good programming for the people, and towards an end that you don't even think about because you're not taught to think. You see, we're not taught to think. We're educated, sure, but it is indoctrination only. The first thing you learn in school is repeat after me. If you repeat after me and you say it correctly, or you say what I want you to say correctly as the correct answer, you get a little gold star. And if you're very good at repeating, then people call you clever. Repeating things that you've been told isn't being clever at all. That's being a good parrot. Repeating after me is a good parrot. That's what they want, because then you get the quality approval stamp. Or put that square on your head, you graduate. You're now unnatural. You're dumb enough to get into their system. So that's the real system we live in. It's quite funny, really. Tragically funny, albeit, because the elite rich can't tell the people they've been killing us. We find the same thing in Africa. That's how they talked about the blacks. Well, you see, you can't help them because they're children, really. They have children's mentality, so you can't really be straightforward with them. That's how the elite treat us all. So the elites, the peasantry of China, is no longer peasantry in Europe or the Americans because they believe in elite breeding, and the elite breeders of every country rule every country. Therefore, it's one big club. Whether the elites are running China, running Europe, running America, running Britain, running Canada, you've proven worthy to join. You're worthy, as they say in Masonry. Second-generation Masons or first-generation Masons can't get terribly high up in the order unless they marry into the order and bring up a son, an offspring, a special. It's a breeding program. You see, in the Rosicrucian books where they keep tongue-in-cheek hinting for the greedy because it's meant to pick up every greedy people into these societies, and through almost stumbling over each other, they tell you that selection, very important. And that's what's on the agenda with the new laws coming in on childbirth. The third-person baby in Britain could be firstborn next year. Selective breeding is what they're getting at. And don't let the lower head rule the upper head, is what they say to them, and nobody understands that. That's why it's always in their language. So it's a breeding program, and a first-generation Mason can't get up terribly high, even in the second degree of Scottish Rite, but if he marries into the organization, he's up 2 generations, and then the offspring can go higher, the son of the Mason, and then the third generation can go higher still. So you're breeding towards, upwards through, selective breeding, and they wisely chosen for you at that level, just like the wives of the nobility they have always chosen for the men. What you do in your free time when you're not breeding is up to yourselves, as long as you're both kept in good financial style. She can do what she wants, and you can do what you want. There's no love there. Love is something that is marketed to the public, because people in high places don't marry out of love. They marry for position and power. When the Normans came to Britain and introduced their wonderful system of lordship over the public and also subservient to the king, and then you have the lords and the feudal lords below them, and the sublords below them, they're servicing in their own patch to guard over as they, use the peasant. And we're bought and sold. They changed the name from slaves, by the way, to serfs in England, because slave was a bit, harsh. They didn't like the word slavery because they were a Christian country now, and they couldn't have that in the history books, so they called them serfs. So 90% of the public were serfs, and they were bought and sold with the land. It started from the time of the Norman invasion, who brought civilization to Europe, by the way, if you can call it civilization. It's the same civilization built through the slaughtering of people. Massive, financially backed as well, along many years in the making, and tremendous logistics in keeping them all supplied at sea and land. It was much bigger than World War II, and it cost the whole thing, and big time. So this is an ancient system coming through here, backed heavily. They had to conquer everything and eliminate all opposition, which they did. And they were terrible rulers. They were inhumane. They were terribly cruel. When the Normans came in, they had the Doomsday Book created. That was an inventory of all that was owned, all documented to who owned it, all that the king owned, and that was the people, the livestock, the houses, children, chickens, everything, buildings. It was a complete inventory of the whole land that he owned. And that was nothing new because the ancient pharaohs had the same system in Egypt. And it was nothing new because the Normans also, a lord would put out his son to a relative, to an uncle or whatever, another lord, and he would be taught the ways of knighthood through this relative. That was traditional with Normans. And we jump back to the pharaohs of Egypt. They did the same thing because their sons would get sent off to different satrapy and call them little princes. And the same bunch would rule the next generation, and so on, and so on. We're getting this close to that big idea, that great work being completed. It's the Spaceman. Hoping you aren't one of those people who accept the world as it's being presented to them. Coast to Coast is next. This has been A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. I'm Space, and I'm out.